Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alissa Peterson. She is going to be our panel moderator for the next panel. She is co-founder and executive director of Boston-based SeaAhead BlueTech Innovation, bringing the maritime clean tech and tech sectors together in a multitude of venues to spark investment in blue innovation. Among other things, they sponsor a program called Sea Swell and Maritime and Technology Mentoring Program that I've gotten involved in a little bit. And a couple of people here on in this conference are also advisors to her program. So Alissa, it's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for being here and for also being part of this ecosystem.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Maggie. Hi, and thank you everyone for having me here today. I am particularly excited about the opportunities that the marine energy space has, particularly as it applies to our ability to address global climate change. And so we are bringing you here today with 3 experts in the grid scale space, which has distinct differences when we're looking at grid scale versus smaller units that are in the water. There are a variety of challenges that come from permitting, from site selection, interactions with other environmental factors, interactions with other industries. And then all of that sits on top of the supply chain challenges, which the offshore wind industry in particular has when they're looking to grow at a significant pace, and we don't have a large installed base yet. And so we don't have the supply chain in place that you might have if you were in another region of the world like the EU. So all of these things play together to make for a really interesting set of opportunities and challenges. There are opportunities for small businesses and large businesses alike. And we're going to talk now to these 3 experts, and we'll start with Trey Taylor. Trey Taylor is the founder and CEO, or not CEO, founder and Chief Commercial Officer. I get there. Founder and Chief Commercial Officer of Verdant Power, and we are excited to have him talk to us today about what Verdant Power has been working on in the tidal energy space, and to hear about their new system in the water. So Trey, without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Alissa. Can you hear me all right?
Excellent.
Okay, very good. I'm waiting for my slides to come up here. Here we go. Good afternoon. It's nice to be with all of you today, and I'll share very quickly with it's not a new system. This is a system that's been around since 2000 when we formed Verdant Power. That's when I founded the company. And since that time, we are now on our 5th generation system, which you see here in this slide. And something to share with everybody, which I think is really important, and Bill Stabe was making reference to it. This is something really important to understand. For infrastructure technology, it takes more than 10 years to go from a working prototype. Now that's the key, working prototype. You hear about a lot of concepts out there, but from working prototype to commercialization, more than 10 years. So what we've been working on is this technology over roughly that course of time, and we refer to this as our commercial standard system that's tailored to sites. It has few moving parts, a fixed pitch, constant speed rotor, and passive yaw system. It's readily scaled to a variety of water conditions and currents, so it's really designed for oceans, tides, rivers, and large canals. This is an optimized system. Where we have been doing this work is at Roosevelt Island in New York. Now, most people, including people who live in New York, don't know about Roosevelt Island. And that's what you see right here. And behind Roosevelt Island is Manhattan. That's New York City. We are in the East Channel of the East River, which is really not a river at all, but it's actually a tidal strait that connects Long Island Sound with the Atlantic Ocean. And what we have here, what you see here on this tri-frame, is a 1/2 scale, 5 meter diameter rotor, 3 of them on a single tri-frame. as a preference to this, we were here in the East River, we were the world's first grid-connected array of tidal power turbines. And we did that late 2006 and on through 2007, off and on for the next 3 or 4 years. We are also America's first marine renewable energy technology to receive a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission grant, or a grant, not grant, but a pilot commercial license. And we received FERC's pilot commercial license in 2012. What we are doing now is we're on a TRL 8 level. We're system commissioning. And what that means is actual system is completed and qualified through test and demonstration. This system is grid connected to Con Ed. So it's a Con Ed distribution grid that we're connected to. And we're focusing on maximizing system power performance, increasing availability and reliability, and reducing project cost. This 1/2 scale 5-meter diameter rotors have a 35 kilowatt generators attached to them. Again, this is 1/2 scale. So that tri-frame is 105 kilowatts on that single tri-frame. The FERC license that we received is up for 1 megawatt of installation here in the East River, which implies putting 30 of these turbines in the water on 10 tri-frames. Now, 1 megawatt for New York City isn't much, but one tri-frame that we've been operating since, that you see here, it's been operating since October 22nd, has been producing more than 1,000 kilowatt hours a day. So this one tri-frame is enough to power 500 Manhattan apartments. But what we're doing is with the remaining 9 tri-frames, again, we're going to do something quite different. And that's what takes us to this next slide. So something that Alejandro talked about earlier today is we're going to be demonstrating what we do, energy and marine renewable energy as an enabler. And it also gets to something that Scott Jen was mentioning about LCOE and cost, but really looking at different values. So what we're doing next at the Wright project site is converting it to support the blue economy, but also the green economy. And what I mean by green economy is sustainability. Verdant Power's mission statement is to help create or help develop sustainable communities around the world. And Verdant Power, we are a mission-driven company. And so we're also not only in ocean and tides, but also river systems. In converting this Wright project into a world-class demonstration facility, we'll be demonstrating integrated energy and hybrid power systems. For one thing, we'll be demonstrating marine renewable energy as distributed generation, since we can put our turbines next to buildings to produce power, like solar collectors on a roof. We'll be demonstrating that. We'll also continue to advance our technology, working with universities in the United States on new componentry, better efficiencies, but keep driving toward improving the technology itself. We'll also be teaming up with Con Ed on energy storage. Because of the predictability of tides, tidal power blends nicely with energy storage. But also we could use flow batteries teamed up with us to create green hydrogen. We'll be demonstrating that in the East River at this new project site. We'll be demonstrating clean water systems. We'll be demonstrating irrigation and aeration pumping systems. We'll be showing underwater data centers, and we'll be creating virtual power plants. And what I mean by a virtual power plant is having hydrokinetic power talking with wind and solar on Roosevelt Island to create base load power for Roosevelt Island. In other words, powering microgrids, which lead to smart grids, which lead to smart cities. We're also working through the Commerce Department and DOE on reverse trade missions, so we can bring companies and countries around the world to come see all of these things working together as hybrid and integrated energy systems in New York City. And we're also demonstrating this, because we're in New York City, in front of the United Nations. So I've been working with the United Nations Development Program, the UNDP, that's been looking at ways to work more closely with the private sector. And so that's what we'll be doing in New York with these systems and other kinds of energy systems as we integrate them. So that's the very next step that Verdant Power will be doing with our successful Series B raise, which is underway with our company. Then the next thing we're going to be doing is scaling up. So we go from a 5-meter diameter rotor to a 10-meter diameter rotor for a commercial project. This is our full-scale project, which we will reach TRL 9, and we're doing this in Wales at the West Anglesey Tidal Demonstration Zone. Now, what we mean by TRL 9, this is going to be, and this is our final commercialization step to go to market. This is called systems operation. for the actual system to be operated over the full range of expected mission conditions. That is, demonstrating system simplicity, robustness, and scalability, making it suitable for a variety of tidal and river project sites as multiple arrays. Now, this full-scale system, a 10-meter diameter rotor, will have a 333 kilowatt generators. So on a single tri-frame, that'll be a 1 megawatt system. We'll start off by doing 2 megawatts, two tri-frames, and then we're going to put 28 more in. And this is at Holy Island. So you're looking at Holy Head in Wales and Holy Island. So we go from Roosevelt Island to Holy Island, working with the Welsh government in Crown Estate leased waters. And we're one of 7 berth holders where we can develop up to 30 megawatts at our particular berth. And that is really the West Anglesey Tidal Demonstration Zone. We're partnering with our Irish partner to develop this project. It was formerly known as the Moorleish Demonstration Zone. So that's it for Verdant Power. That's an update on where we're going and what lies ahead for this company. Thank you, Alissa.
Hi, Elizabeth. Ruth is come and gone a little bit, so she might not be here. If you want to skip ahead to the next person, is Alexander Thillerup is here. Oh, did Alissa freeze? It looks like Alissa froze. All right. Oh, here's Ruth though, so that's great.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'll get your slides right up. I guess I will. I don't have your introduction in front of me, but this is Ruth Perry. She you originally worked for Shell. Right now you're getting more deeply and deeply involved with Mayflower Wind. She handles a lot of their permitting as well as kind of technology adoption and environmental monitoring effects and things of that nature. So I'm really looking forward to this, and the floor is yours, and feel free to correct anything I just said.
No, that was great, Elise. Thank you for that introduction. And I apparently lots of IT issues today. I love when it happens right before you're supposed to talk and you have to restart. But I guess that's the world we live in. Oh, Alissa, were you jumping in?
Oh, I was going to say, I know both of us got kicked out just as we were about to speak, but we're here now.
I know, it's great. I love it. Yeah, so thanks everyone for having me. Today's been a great day. It actually really excites me. I'm actually a physical oceanographer by background, and a lot of my work, prior research life, was in autonomous technologies. But I spend a lot more of my time in the policy space and the permitting and regulatory project side as well. So I'm here talking about Mayflower and a little bit of my views on how environmental monitoring and ocean technology should intersect. And so I'll start, next slide please, with a little bit of introduction around Mayflower Wind. Mayflower Wind is a joint venture between 2 companies, Ocean Winds, which is a merger between EDPR and NG and Shell. And we have quite a bit of experience operating in the offshore and onshore energy development side, both renewables and oil and gas. And Shell, for instance, has 60 years of operations in the Gulf of Mexico from shallow water to deep water. So we've seen a lot of the technologies you've heard about progress, not only in the engineering and design, but how we're able to monitor our offshore operations, both above the water and below the water, using autonomous technologies. So it's great to be applying that to the renewable sector. Next slide. So just to orient everybody, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the offshore wind leases that BOEM issued off the Cape of Massachusetts. Mayflower is this one in dark blue that you see on your screen, and our proposed landfall areas coming in through the Muskegon Channel. And we're hoping to generate upwards of 1,600 megawatts from that lease area. Next slide. So we want to support the goals to make Massachusetts a hub for offshore wind. We recently signed our power purchase agreement with the state, finalized that, and under that, we've invested $77 million in programs to be administered by Mass EC over the lifetime of that PPA. And you can see a few of those there. I'm working particularly in the innovative technologies and applied research space, much of that being focused on offshore environment. And then you can see some of the other things that we've invested in around workforce training and development, all of this which comes into the ocean technology space and the renewable space as well. So looking forward to building those programs as we work towards building our project and delivering electricity. Next slide. So this is probably not new, or this is probably not new to most people, but just a simple project schematic of offshore wind and the complexity, because you're generating power offshore in federal waters and you're bringing that power onshore through state waters and local towns and townships to get it onto the grid. But why I like to use this is to lead into my later half of the presentation, is that offshore wind generally is a really autonomous energy development relative to oil and gas. It's not a people-driven energy development scheme. So once everything is set up, then and you're in the operations phase, then it's really a few individuals and utilizing technology to monitor performance. You're not sending multiple people out on the water, nor are people having to live on facilities as you do with other offshore projects. And so this really should tie us into being able to do a lot of the monitoring, whether that's environmental, operational, performance-based, to be able to do that autonomous and rely on technologies of scale. Next slide. So the permitting process, this has popped up a couple times today, but it's a very long process and it's very built to be heavy data rich on the front end. So a lot of work that goes into site characterization, both seafloor, seabed, water column, monitoring and mapping environmental resources, looking at the impacts of what we intend to build across a project design envelope. So that may be different foundation types, different turbine heights, different turbine sizes. All of that envelope has to be assessed for its impacts on the environment. And remember, offshore, onshore, local environments, so different levels. So it's a lot of information. It's a very front-end heavy process. But what I want to highlight is kind of what's after the installation. So part of the thing that we're required to do is monitoring during pre-construction, during construction, post-construction, monitoring during operations to assess changes and impacts over time, and even monitoring at the decommissioning phase. And a lot of this is really focused on environmental monitoring, from marine mammals to birds to anything that's going to be in and around these projects. And so that opens up a lot of opportunities for autonomous technology, but also to scale autonomous technology's role in environmental monitoring. Next slide. So I like to put this up. This is a product of Global Ocean Observing System and NOAA and JASCO, but it's really highlighting the fact that there is a major shift in how we observe the ocean towards autonomous technologies and other types of traditional ocean technologies such as buoys. But what we're able to do is not only detect what's in the water column, but look at impacts of those on species, detect species, look at changes in the system at a variety of different levels across the ecosystem. And all of this can be integrated. These systems can be integrated with one another. And I put the offshore wind turbine in there because if you think about the challenges and the opportunities, especially in the Northeast, given the unique environmental challenges that we have and the unique species in these areas and the reliance on fishing. There's a real opportunity to even use offshore wind structures as platforms of opportunity, to instrument those with different types of sensors that can help us look at long time shifts in climate, ocean temperature, and ecosystem change over time. And so from my point of view and my science hat, I look at it as an opportunity of now we're going to have multiple structures in the water and very predictable grid systems that we can use to include some of the ocean technologies, but also include to be points of either interconnection or charging or data upload for autonomous systems that we're going to have to rely on to do our monitoring. Next slide. And so BOEM recently released the image in a white paper on the left looking at examples of impacts at foundation sites. And so what I'd like to point out here is that the change is not going to only be negative, but it could be positive as well. It's going to be dynamic, it's going to change these systems. And so how can we use different ocean technologies like you see on the right from the Ocean Tracking Network, for instance, to be able to detect fish, monitor things that are swimming by platforms, monitor what they're eating, for instance, and then fill in the gaps between our foundations with systems such as gliders and underwater gliders, wave gliders, surface gliders. These are all technologies that are currently available to us, but we have not been able to really instrument them at scale to do wide-ranging and real-time environmental monitoring at a project level. And if you click, didn't want to leave out birds. And so it's not only monitoring below the surface, but just click once, should pop up. There we go. But also autonomous technologies that can be above the water that can monitor for things, birds, bats, and such. And how do we combine all of this information so that we can inform management? And next slide. And what I get really excited about, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of people I've worked with in my career are up in Massachusetts. This is a major hub, and I pulled this from the Ocean Asset Map, which really shows all of the technology across industry and academia and research organizations. All the brain power, all the tools and things are in this area. And so how do we bring all of this together and really use it to accelerate and innovate how we monitor the impacts of these offshore wind farms? And last slide. And so where do we go? So you've heard all of these great talks. You've heard different levels of sensors, systems that are at different scales of the TR readiness. So some might be in early development, some are in market. But how do we bring all of this together? The autonomy is there and the sensors are there. But what I'm working on, particularly with offshore wind, is how do we bridge that into the regulatory process? So we have to be able to rely on these sensors to do just as good as people on the water. And we have to do so in such a way that the data that we're collecting enables regulators to make decisions and to manage the resources while understanding the impacts of our project. And this has been a major hurdle. And so I'm hoping, the piece of the puzzle that you haven't heard today that we have to work towards if we're really going to scale our ability to use autonomy is that we have to integrate this into the regulatory approach in how we monitor. So I think that's my last slide and I'll end there, Alissa.
All right, thank you so much, Ruth. It's, really, I think there's a lot of questions that came up for me from your conversation. So we'll get to the Q&A shortly. We want to give Alexander an opportunity to speak first before we jump into the Q&A. So we are now going to hear from Alexander Thillerup, who is the VP of Renewables for the US for the Exodus Group. And the Exodus Group provides engineering and advisory services to clients in the offshore sector. And Today, he, though, is going to be representing some work being done by the New Bedford Ocean Cluster. So I'll let you explain how it all fits together.
There we go. Thank you very much, Alissa. Thank you very much. So yes, today I'll be representing the New Bedford Ocean Cluster and especially what we're doing around the offshore wind. So there's going right now, and I just want to set the scene, because right now there's a lot of talk about offshore wind and all the things it can do for all the things that can that it can do, and what is it bringing. So right now we're looking into this massive pipeline of capex expenditure. So the latest estimate is $80 billion worth of capex and opex over the next 10 years, and that number keeps growing for every day and week we are going into it. This massive pie of And you've also seen a lot of different ways that has like, okay, so what does that actually mean? How does that broken down? And one of the things we are looking at is that, well, this is complicated. We heard just from Mayflower. There's also Vineyard Wind that is putting in this, and there's like 17 different, I think it's 17 or 19 different developments that are happening right now. And what this is that they're actually happening on different development timescales. So each of these developments are on these different timescales, and they will become live at very different times, as you can see over the next 10 years. These are all the all these $80 billion worth of revenue that's coming in, and in different states at different times. So this is just like on a geographical scale. Then you start to look at it from a, well, what does that mean? Then we break it down into the different packages, into the different subcomponents. And we're still on the very large packages. These are all, all the ones you're seeing here to the right. They are all predominantly European players that are coming in and participating in this. So what I'm trying to say is that this is really complicated in terms of what does this mean. This is $80 billion worth of business, and a lot of the discussions that we are having with small, medium enterprises, local companies, and local communities, business communities here is that, oh wow, this is really big business. We got no idea what it actually means. And that's fair enough, because it is like, what does it actually mean? So what I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about is really what is the challenges for these small medium enterprises as we're talking to them, that are currently in a business that is doing quite well within their chosen business, and they're looking at this and how can they actually pivot into offshore wind and take advantage of this opportunity. So it's really about, the very first barrier to this is to understand this potential market, the size of it, the complexity, the breakdown, and you need to understand this on a very granular level in actually to understand where you're fitting in. Are you working on the water? Are you working on the wharf? At what time? What geographies are you working at? And then actually taking that to translate that into what we call potential market, like real tangible company-specific opportunities. Because $80 billion, well, if your current revenue is $2 million or $5 million a year, how do you pivot into this? What part of the market are you pivoting into? So that's really the next part of it, and really about finding the right collaborators regionally, overseas. Most of the current packages, as we are calling them, are coming in from Europe, and then we actually get to how do we then create a business model into that. So what we're really doing with the New Bedford Ocean Cluster is really helping the local communities, because this is a full-time job to do this, and to have this So we're really helping the local communities in New Bedford, but also in Massachusetts, identifying these opportunities. Really understand, okay, how do we break these $80 billion worth of capex? How do we break it down into bite-sized opportunities that companies can actually go after? Something that you can actually build a business model around. You know, at the end of the day, we're businesses. We have to be able to do that. And we're taking these opportunities. We're bringing them to the New Bedford and Massachusetts communities. And then we are really helping them, enabling those businesses by putting it into terms that they understand. How can they access these opportunities? What do they need to do to develop their business model that's specific to their business and to their chosen area? So that's really what we are doing currently. And I just want to quickly show you, we are basically working with European suppliers. We're working with the developers and the tier ones. So that is the packages we're talking about. We're working with the local communities, Mass CEC, UMass, New Bedford, Ocean Cluster, in order to bring all this information together. And we are also managing the Local First process for Vineyard Wind, which is basically working directly with Vineyard Wind and the local, so the tier ones, in order to bring all these opportunities into the hands of the local businesses. So I just want to stop here and just say, it's like, if no one really has the full picture, if they think they do, please be careful. Take it with a grain of salt. And now it's actually a really good time to access and to participate in the offshore wind industry. It is definitely starting, and it's definitely accelerating over the next many years.
Thank you so much, Alexander. That was really informative. So on the supply chain side, we're going to move into Q&A now. If you have a question, please put it into the Q&A button at the bottom, the same as you've been doing in earlier rounds, and I will facilitate and ask the questions of the group. And so I will start though. Because and I'll build off of what you were just saying, Alexander. So the figuring out entry into the grid scale, offshore wind or other sectors, offshore wind being the opportune one in our region at the moment. It's a big issue. We have startups. I see this firsthand, right? We have startups in our Blue Swell incubator right now. And I was just on the phone with one of them today, and he has an opportunity, he thinks, in the offshore wind space in training, for instance. And trying to coach him through how he might fit in the supply chain is really difficult. And so it's exciting to see what you all are doing in trying to help small businesses understand all the different players and ways that they might fit in. I was wondering if you could comment on any of the companies that you've been working with and how you've tried to help them get themselves situated inside of the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really about understanding, as I said, understanding the granularity of and the specific of the offshore wind supply chain. So what we are really doing is we're actually going into the individual companies and saying, hey, this is what you're good at. What are you really good at? And that's like, because people can do a lot of things, but what are you really, really good at? And then draw parallels to, okay, how does that fit into what is actually going to be needed once we have that comparison, or that it's really just accessing our network and saying, okay, if you want to go into this part of the market, you need to talk to this person, this person, and this person. So take the workforce development training. Maybe this is a company that needs to talk to Bristol Community College and the mass training. Maybe that's the right connection for them. So it's really just about creating those connections once we know where they're going to fit in.
That's great. I'm gonna connect you to him. We're just gonna cut this short. Excellent. And we have a question here for Trey, where the road is wondering if you might comment on if there's a preferred turbine type for tidal energy generation.
Yes, there is. a comment to make. The wind industry never took off until all technologies began to converge on 3-bladed horizontal axis turbines. So if you look at in the marine tidal sector, if you look at those technologies that are most advanced, they are 3-bladed horizontal axis turbines. They're not ducted turbines. They're not vertical axis turbines, but 3-bladed horizontal axis turbines. That's preferred.
Great. Can you elaborate on why that is? What is it that makes them preferred?
Well, it's also efficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a ducted system has problems with entrainment.
Mm-hmm.
Wildlife debris gets caught up in those things and clogs them up. So the OpEx would not be good in ducted systems. So that's one example. And vertical axis turbines have to turn much faster, so the efficiencies aren't as good with vertical axis turbines, particularly in water currents, unless there's shallow water. But all water currents, all technologies require water current speed of around 2 meters per second. So if you're using, and first of all, we tested ducted systems with the Canadian government at Niagara Falls, and we tested vertical axis turbines with the University of Massachusetts on the Merrimack River. And because they turn so fast, seagrass gets wrapped around them. Or if you do what the Koreans did and took that system at Oldemuck Pass, you put a screen around it, then the screen acts as all the debris gets sucked up against the screen, cutting the debris off, or cutting the current off. So again, I'm sticking to unducted horizontal, 3-bladed horizontal axis turbines is the answer to the question being asked.
Thank you. And we've got one now for Ruth, which is they're really interested in the use of autonomous technology for monitoring and wondering if that is being done already overseas on systems out there, or if there's something unique about the US market which makes it ideal for being done here first.
Yeah, so it's not unique. It is being done overseas. There's quite a bit of work using autonomous technologies, some of the larger AUV underwater gliders and such to conduct geological and geophysical surveys. That's been done over here for many years. Shell was recently part of an X Prize to even fund how to do that faster and in ultra deep waters. And a lot of that, the team that won was a European team. So that is being there. I think in terms of applying it to scale at offshore wind, it's not applied to scale yet for environmental monitoring. For looking at operational monitoring and system detection, yes, they are doing some work around birds and such, but in terms of doing it at a scale that replaces human-based monitoring or field surveys, that really hasn't been done yet because of the permitting, or excuse me, because of the regulatory challenges. But it's trending that way. And a lot of lessons to be learned in Europe that can be applied here in terms of the technology itself. But our regulatory construct in the US is much more complicated in terms of the different statutes that you have to work under, Migratory Bird Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act. So that makes it really difficult, one of the scale inhibitors, I'll say.
Got it. And thank you. Are we running on time, or do we have time for more questions?
You have 6 more minutes.
Oh, all right. All right, good, because I have more questions. So I wanted to follow up, Trey, on something that you had talked about briefly before, which was, it's taken 20 years to get your system to where it is today. And, that's a long time to have to, continue to find ways to fund your company as you grow to the point where you can take in, revenue. And, I have a lot of, having been into venture-backed companies myself, I have a lot of sympathy for that. And so I was wondering if you might tell us a little bit about how you thought about supporting your company through the years and the kinds of sources of funding that you've found to be most, useful for you, and the types of investors that you've brought into your company.
Thanks. Good, excellent question. I used to work for the Electric Power Research, for the Edison Electric Institute, the investor-owned utility, investor-owned utility trade association. Back in those days, the government paid for technology development. You had EPRI and the utilities all pouring into advanced technologies. Nowadays, and by the way, our business partner to date to make us successful in New York has been the Department of Energy, DOE, and NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, the US Navy. But with grants nowadays, they come up with 50%. So you have to find a 50% match from the private sector. Private equity does not invest in new technology. They'll invest in projects, but they won't invest in new technology. It's risk adverse, if you will. So we found the balance of money from mortgaging our houses, selling everything, going for broke, if you will, and family and friends. So we've raised to date $46 million to get to TRL 8. Half that money came from our own pockets, and the other half came from our business partners, DOE and NYSERDA.
Wow, that's really impressive. Really impressive.
We've learned how to live on peanut butter and jelly.
You know, it's real. This is a real deal here, folks. So that's really exciting. I just want to wish you the best of luck in your round. We can take that offline as you're raising your Series B. Just shoot me a note about it. We have a group of angel investors. I don't know if they'll have enough money, but they might throw something in there.
Every penny's welcomed.
Yeah, I hear that. And on that front, as we're talking about money, Ruth, of course you have everyone's eyes open with the idea that there's $15 million, of course, spread over a number of years going into research and development through MassCEC. What do you see as the goals of that funding, and how do you envision deploying it?
So I think there's going to be a couple different ways that we're going to look at deploying it. Some of it is going to be related to innovation around what we have to monitor. So for instance, fisheries, marine mammal detections. I think you've seen some of this pop up, obviously, with SeaAhead and Vineyard. So it's going to be along the lines there. And then there's going to be some other kind of the more socioeconomic innovation, workforce and such. And so we've structured it in a way to get a few things started. Those are going to be things that I'm working on around the marine science space to think ahead in terms of think ahead and get ahead of the monitoring that we're going to have to do. And just to give you a little bit of context, we're going to need to know quite a bit of information as we're constructing on where marine mammals are, because how we shut down our activities based on where mammals are is going to be really key. All of that's done by human observing right now. And so how do we design a system that gives regulators the confidence that they can believe in the autonomous detections, get that in enough real time that both they and us can make a management decision. So some of it's going to be the context, right? How do we think about what that system looks like and what are all the components, and then we have to do the field testing, and then we can scale it up. And so there's some thought there into the systems itself, and then there's some pieces of the technologies that may have to be developed. The database, being able to automate the data analysis, right? So dealing with acoustics data is a major challenge. Mm-hmm. Dealing with digital aerial and detections during digital aerial at a real time is going to be a challenge. So there's going to be different components of that are going to be involved in the innovation part piece.
That's great. I imagine that we are at time now, and so I really just want to thank all of our panelists today for contributing their time and expertise, and I'm sure that we have not heard the last from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.